Video content from White Noise?
Follow me follow me tonight.
Hey everyone, Jenna here, and today I wanted to give you a little look at the behind the scenes of how we go about recording and editing all of the short stories that you hear at the beginning of White Noise episodes. So first thing that I do when I get these stories is I kind of lay it all out in an easy to read format, because it's not just my voice that is going to go into these. It's going to require character voices, a narrator, in addition to sound effects, music, whatever else we decide to put into it. So I organize it in terms of the characters that we're going to be using to make it easier for our volunteer voice actors and highlight their parts. So if I go to send someone, hey, can you voice the character Da Chao in this story? They can easily go in and say like, oh, Da Chao is the blue and pink parts. I'll get into why that's weird in a second for this one. And all of the other blank parts are the narration. Now, I normally end up doing the narration just because it's easier. The narration is usually the most lines out of anything that is in that story. It's usually narration driven. And I don't want to just offload that work onto somebody else when I'm the one who's going to be editing most of it anyway, because that is the bulk of the work right up front. Most of the time, there are 0 or 1 female characters. If there is more than 1 female character, I have to be one of those female characters, because we only have 1 female voice actor volunteer. Thankfully, I'd say 90% of the time there are 0 or 1 female characters, so that makes things a lot easier because that means that I can do the narration for it. So in this story there are only 2 characters, 1 male, 1 female, and each of them has a normal version of themselves and an impersonated version of themselves, because each one ends up getting impersonated by a Morat. So I included some notes to our voice actors on how I want them to sound when they're doing the alien versions of their voices. We can kind of work that out and see what their thoughts are as things go along, but I'm just gonna send them my notes and see what they come up with. Meanwhile, let's get into our portion of it, which is the narration. And the narration is going to comprise the bulk of my work, which is all of the rest of the stuff that is not highlighted. So there's going to be some sound effects, a little bit of music, but for the most part it's just going to be narration. Narration itself comes with its own set of challenges and is kind of a skill set in itself. If you listen to an audiobook, you know that a good narrator can kind of make or break the experience. So I'm gonna go narrate this bad boy real quick, and I'll be back in a couple hours, I suspect. Alright, so we're back, having recorded all of my narration. As you can see, I'm using Audacity for all of my recording. Audacity is a completely free software that is available for both PC and Mac. It's very easy to use. It has a ton of tools that the community has created, so I would highly recommend Audacity for anyone who's looking to get into editing or podcasting. I have recorded my narration part in stereo. You can see there are 2 channels, the left and right channel, that are kind of occurring side by side right here. The other option is to record in mono, so that would mean that it's just one sound wave. It's coming the same out of both left and right. It doesn't really have a balance. I have to record in stereo with my microphone because it freaks out if I try to record in mono, but I will be, one of the first things that I'm going to be doing with this narration track is splitting it to mono. The reason for that is, for narration, it is always going to be in mono, because voices only have like a single point source, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm in a room or in a space. So I just want to sound like it's just me talking, no frills, no filters, it's just voice. And you'll hear the difference between my narration voice and the character voices, which will be in stereo, later on once I start stitching those together. So once I have all of this recorded, before I even start cleaning it up or applying any effects to it or anything, I'm going to split it to mono and delete the duplicate track. Reason being, it is going to make all of my normal cleanup steps go a lot faster. So this is just the full raw recording of me talking, stumbling, breathing. I haven't started cutting this down yet at all. And there are 4 steps that I will do to a voice recording before I start doing anything else with it. And those are noise reduction, noise gate, equalization, and limiter. And what each of those are going to do, noise reduction is going to take any background noise that's going on in your recording, which there's always some, and automatically edit it out of the entire thing, not just the parts between your speech. The noise gate is going to clean up any remaining sound between your voice and make that completely silent. The equalization is just going to be a curve that is called low roll-off for speech, so anything below a certain threshold is just going to get edited out because the human voice cannot go below, I think it's 20 hertz or something like that. And the last one is limiter, which just sets a soft cutoff of a certain decibel level so that any time the waveform gets close to that or goes above it, it does not blow out your ears. So I'm going to go do all those and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So now that we've got all of those done, that should sound like a nice clean recording.
Silent Killer by Paulo Andrade. He moved slowly.
Great. Yep, that sounds nice and clean. So I'm going to start going through this and kind of cleaning it up. You can kind of see where I decided to redo a line occasionally just because I may have muddled it up a little bit, I stumbled over my words or thought I could do a little better. So one thing you'll notice as I'm going through this is these kind of long pauses in between me reading things. And the reason for that is when you're doing narration, you never hear breath, at least in professional level audiobooks. You never hear someone taking in a breath between words or between sentences. So when you're performing the narration, you have to be really conscious of that. You also don't want to be, you want to do everything you can to kind of not dry out your throat because you're talking so much. So usually what I'll do is I'll read a line until I kind of run out of breath, and then I will stop, inhale, and then get ready for the next one. And there has to be that little buffer of silence before and after so that when I go to cut out a pause like this, it just sounds smooth instead of there being like a little tick in between where you can hear I was taking a breath.
From safety measures. He gasped into his armor and quickly lowered his weapon.
So you can see that sounded like nice and smooth. You can hear like the pause in the rhythm of the narration, but you can't hear what sounds like me taking a breath in the middle of that would kind of pull you out of the moment. One thing that I know is going to happen once I have this all edited down and once I have the performance lines back from my volunteer voice actors is all of this is going to be interspersed with their voice acted lines. So what I can start doing as I'm going through and editing this is I can start cutting up the narration where I know those voice lines are going to go, because a lot of that work is going to be me lining those up. So here's an example of me kind of stumbling over something, and I don't retake the entire line from the very beginning because I know I can stitch it together like I'm about to show you. So I kind of stumbled over Pan-Oceanian Father Night right here. So here's what
Poise
I
that would have made a Pan-Oceanian Father Knight look like a drunkard.
So I kind of stumbled over the line Pan-Oceanian Father Night.
That would have made a
So what I normally do here is I look at low volume parts of the waveform that would make a good opportunity to sort of stitch these together. I know I don't want to keep this bit, and I'm kind of ambivalent about this first portion here. So let's see where this is. Okay, so I can probably stitch it together right before the sound in made. So let's see what that might sound like. If we do this and just delete that portion, does that sound natural?
Poise that would have made a Pan-Oceanian Father Knight look like...
Yeah, sounds good. So that transition is right here at made, but if you can't tell,
Poise
then
that would have
I've
made
done my job.
Poise that would have made a Pan-Oceanian Father...
Yep, sounds good. And I'm revealing my deepest, darkest secret. I do shit like that all the time, especially in interviews for both myself and guests. If someone stumbles over a word and decides to try and retake it, I can just try to stitch them together at whatever time seems best. There are other tricks if those two parts that I'm trying to transition don't quite line up. I can crossfade them a little bit so that the transition sounds smoother. But there's ways around a few things. I've stitched things together pretty creatively in the past just to cut out some stuttering and stumbling. Alright, so now that I've got this edited down a little bit more to the final performances of the narration, and I still gotta wait for my voice actor lines to come back, I'm gonna fill in a couple more things with what I know I need. I know I need intro music, and I think I have something in mind for this one. Yeah, I like that one. This is No Copyright Sounds on YouTube. It's one of several sources that I'll go to for music. There are some copyright-free dedicated content creators like PunchDeck or like No Copyright Sounds, which allow you to use their music royalty-free. There are other resources that we also have if I can't find something on either of those. White Noise has an Artlist subscription which lets us browse songs by mood or genre or even a particular instrument. And that is probably most of what we use, but I also try to support some of these content creators on YouTube as well. I'm just gonna kind of go with the cheap version, which is just to record it directly to Audacity. I have a new stereo track. I'm going to set my input device to my speakers so that what I'm hearing is what's getting recorded. Set this to be the only track that I can hear so that it's not also recording my narration that's already there. Hit record and then play. And then watch the waveform because I'm paranoid. So what I've done here with the music is called kind of ducking the volume level, and that's done with the envelope tool, which lets you put nodes, these little kind of volume control points, along one specific track, so that you can adjust the volume at particular time points. And that means that this part over here is boosted a little bit beyond full volume, and this part over here is at normal full volume, where this part in the middle is at a ducked volume. The volume levels at the start and end of that part fade up and down, so it's not just a quick step, it's a gradual transition, because otherwise that would sound weird.
Silent Killer by Paulo Andrade.
That's alright. Hush.
Okay, that's better. I think I also want some creepy low-tone background music for when the impersonator first comes in. So let's see if we can find something. Ooh, I like that one. That's good. Oh, that's creepy. I love it. Okay, we're going with those two. So, once we get the voice lines back from our voice actors, I'll be back in a minute and we can work at lining all those up. And we're back. Sorry for the bright-ass window behind me, but you work with what you got. So, I have now received the voice lines from both of my volunteer actors, so thank you to Alice and Jason who did the parts of Chao and Jiang. I have already imported all of their voice lines, which they each recorded as separate clips, and I've already performed all of those 4 cleanup steps on their lines that I mentioned earlier. I've now got them divvied up to where I know they're going to be kind of kept together, so each of these is a full line, and there's going to be narration sandwiched in between them. You'll notice that some of these have different sample rates, which a higher sample rate corresponds to higher audio quality. So the actors are in slightly lower audio quality, but that's not that big of a deal. It's only once you start to get down here that it actually starts to become a problem and you can hear the difference. But most are going to be in 4410 or 4800 hertz, or 48,000 rather. So I'm just going to drag these two all the way over and slightly past it so that I can start working with all of these cuts in here and start lining everything up. You'll notice that my narration track is in mono, their tracks are in stereo. You won't really be able to hear the difference until I start applying effects to them, but for now, just know that that is intentional.
Measures.
Dachau?
He gasped into his armor and quickly lowered his weapon.
Okay, timing on that sounds good. You do need a little bit of breathing room in between, so like if I wanted to, I could line up the voice actor's line right at the end of my narration, or even like line them up right after each other, but obviously that's not going to sound as good in terms
From
of
safety
pacing.
measures.
Dachau?
Because you don't want everybody just like sounding like they're talking over each other. So there is like a tiny bit of silence that has to be a buffer between those. You'll notice that there's a bit of tailing silence that's different from just empty space in that it's actually part of the voice clip at the end of each of the actor's voice line. The reason for that is I'm going to be putting a little bit of echo to sound like they're in interior space. That's one of the effects that I'll be applying to their voices, and that echo needs somewhere to actually occur. So if I were to apply an echo to my narration right here, it might echo, trail off, and then just get cut off as soon as that clip actually ends, and that's just going to sound awful. So I'm just going to keep doing this for a little bit, and I'll come back once this scene is done. So I have an entire folder of resources for sounds that I end up using frequently, one of which is an actual like resource pack for ambiance noises, spaceships, and then go back over to this sword core that I really liked. This is what I was after. So I'm gonna let that run through the entire thing, and then you can kind of see the waveforms of it recording as it goes on.
Bang, bang.
The Hacktow suit suddenly flared up, warning klaxons blaring so...
Okay, I like that. So then there's this kind of big block of narration telling you what's going on, how she's hacking him, then placing a decharge and leaving. So we are probably going to want some sinister music in here. That one. So it's got kind of a nice natural increase in volume right there, so I think I'm going to use that part for the scene transition since it sounds pretty sinister, and that means I won't really have to do any enveloping for this one. It'll just kind of natural.
unconscious body with it.
The rule of thumb for transitions and intros is try to have about 5 to 10 seconds of audio. So that's about 7 seconds worth. So yeah, I'm going to place a node right there for where I want the music to start fading out for the next block of narration.
Dachau, the real Dachau, was about to grow some new gray hairs.
Cool. It's a good scene transition.
The aliens have infiltrated the perimeter.
So that is the impersonated Jiang, who is Jason doing a very good job sounding like he's just crawled out of hell. And then also Alice as Dachau doing an excellent job sounding very commanding and in charge.
Crawled out of hell.
I know! Where have you been in the past 30 minutes?
So during that line, apparently we're supposed to have me saying Dachau snarled an answer in the middle of that, but I might end up changing that. It sounds pretty good when she's just kind of angrily ranting, and we already know that she's snarling an answer, so rather than cut this up and put my narration in the middle of that, I'm just going to delete that part in my narration and let the entire line go on as is before bringing it back to my narration.
Wait, where is this infiltrator, Officer Zhang?
You know, so there's that cool sound right in there. I really like that, and the timing happens to be pretty fortuitous. It doesn't have to be, like, I don't have a hard start to when this music needs to start or end. So I think I'm gonna have that be, like, I'm just gonna have that kind of stand on its own. That's really nice.
Friendly ping.
Wait, where is this infiltrator, Officer Zhang?
That sounds really good. Most importantly, I need a shotgun slug pumping into the chamber, which pretty much for any weapon sounds like that, I am going to turn to Apex Legends or Titanfall, because Respawn is really, really good at their sound design. And one of my favorites is the EVA 8 shotgun. It's just that nice sort of check as it gets drawn. But there's also the Peacekeeper, which is nice, which is sort of a pump action shotgun. But I think I'm gonna go with the EVA for this one.
Into the chamber. But she was too late.
Good. So the last big step that I want to take a look at is those reverb effects that I talked about for each of the actors' voice lines. When I say reverb, I mean echo. That's all it means. This is, it sort of gives you more control over the room size, the echo decay, how much diffusion you're getting, all of those things that you can look up what each of those means. With this, I can make it sound like someone is talking in the next room over, or they're in another building. Or if I were to apply this to music, I could make it sound like a club from the outside or something. But I don't really need all of those tools right now. I just need a pretty simple building interior. So right now, it just sounds like she's kind of plain.
I know! Where have you been in the past 30 minutes?
See how that sounds.
I know! Where have you been in the past 30 minutes? Where...
And you can kind of see how different that sounds from, like, my narration, because you're hearing slightly different things coming out of the left and right channels, even if you don't consciously realize it. Whereas with narration voice in mono...
The man looked like he'd crawled out of hell.
It's just single source, and it sounds just more generic, and it's meant to kind of fade into the background in comparison to the characters. And I'm going to apply the same reverb to all of them. Don't crash. Good. Oh, that's gonna take a long time. And so it did. That's because I made the mistake of applying all of those effects after I had spaced everything out, so it kind of had to apply the reverb to even the parts with no sound at all. If I had done that step at the very beginning when all of those clips were right next to each other, it would have gone a lot faster. But oftentimes I don't really know how I want that to sound until everything's kind of placed and lined up. So I'm okay with that. I also went back to that final scene and decided to add a few more sound effects. There's a bit where the alien unloads her combi rifle into Dachau, where I threw in a 3-round burst prowler from Apex Legends, since it sounds kind of compact and has 3-round bursts.
Rifle into the Dao Ying's chest.
And you can see that the... Sorry, I have a plane going overhead. You can see that the audio there is enveloped, because otherwise that would just kind of blow out your ears if you're not expecting it. And then this is Dachau responding with a blast from her shotgun.
Dachau fired off a single slug that exploded against the wall as her aim was thrown off by the first impact.
So after that, thankfully, that creepy soundtrack, that creeping song that I put in earlier when Jiang came in ended up lasting a lot longer than I expected, which is great for me. It's nice ambiance, and it also happened to end around the end of the story. So that means that I can just fade the audio right back up, bring that into the foreground, and then this would just kind of fade into the beginning of the episode, leaving Ben to transition that however he wanted to, and yeah, so this is what the very end of it sounds like.
On the Invincibles line. It would be a fun day.
So sort of a very sinister note to end on.
Thank you to Paulo for the story, and to Jason and Alice for their voices and suggestions.
Yeah, so that's definitely not a happy note to end on because, nobody really won in that scenario. So overall, there is the entire story with all the music and sound effects and character voice lines, narration, all of it. After this, I would just export it and send it to Ben. In a perfect world, I would want to export this as a FLAC because those are lossless audio files, but apparently FLAC files don't play nicely with Ben's Mac, so I would just have to export this as an MP3, and I would give it one final listen through to see if I want to tweak the timing on the delivery of any of these, or see if anything is too loud or too quiet, or if it just ends up sounding like garbage once I've come back to it after I haven't listened to it 8 times. So thank you guys so much for watching all of this. I hope it helped some of you who might be interested in it. I hope it gave some of you who were curious a peek behind the curtain as to all the work that goes into it. You can see how this can easily scale if there were more sound effects or more voices that were needed. It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. The editing itself, it might be a lot of me staring at a screen waiting for an effect to apply or for something to export then upload, even more so for full podcast episodes, but it is a lot of fun because you get to control just some little tweaks, you get to add stuff, you get to add in music, and you get to work with some really amazing authors and volunteers, and yeah, it's just amazing. If anyone is interested in also becoming a voice actor for the show, you have to have a good quality mic set up to begin with. But just reach out to myself or Ben, let us know you're interested. If you have a story you want to submit, of course, send it to info@whitenoisepodcast.com, or if you have any other skills that you feel like you could provide or you want to try your hand at some of this, do let me know. And of course, if anyone has any questions on what I talked about or additional effects or ideas that you have, anything that you can do to help us get better or quicker, that'd be really amazing. So thank you guys so much for watching this, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of White Noise.